Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I am the food enthusiast here at J Moore Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Those of you joining us live, drop your comments and questions for my guest or myself into the comment box, and I will check from time to time. This week's guest is a former syndicated columnist for the Chicago Tribune and Washington Post, Chip Carter. He started covering the farming world in 2009 and traveled nonstop learning the ropes. 7 years ago, Chip started a new media company with the express intent and purpose of making a national TV series. He is the CEO, producer, and host of Where the Food Comes From. Did you know that tomatoes are berries? Bears don't like honey. Sweet potato is just one word. And in a few years, we may not have any more bananas or citrus. This is the story of where our food comes from, and he doesn't mean the supermarket. Chip has milked water buffaloes, climbed to the top of a 900-foot cargo crane, got up at 3 a.m. to make blue cheese at Clemson University, plowed behind a mule team, and now Chip can add to his list being a guest on the Food Enthusiast. Let's welcome Chip.
Thank you so much, Darren. Hello, Baltimore. Hello, J Moore Living. I'm thrilled to be here and be having this conversation. I love talking about the ways we get fed. There's so much focus on what's on the table, and that's not wrong. But it's where it comes from. If we don't pay attention to where it comes from, it never gets to the table. And I see opportunities across the spectrum from the farm to the table. We all know that nothing brings down barriers between people more than sitting down to break bread. But when you take it
Agreed.
all the way back to the farm and you can follow that contiguous whole from the earth to the table and then all sit down together, now you've really got something to talk about. Now you've really got a powerful platform, hopefully for change.
Yeah. Well, we're going to definitely get into the show, but what's on your plate to do today other than doing this show?
Well, we got to go get our road vehicle out of the shop and get ready to get back on the road and continue filming. After this, I'll be rolling straight into a meeting with some of the people from Johnson Space Center in Houston, which sounds like a crazy meeting until you find out we spent the last 2 weeks at Kennedy Space Center on Cape Canaveral because we're making a series of shows and eventually our first documentary film with NASA about how we're going to grow food in space farmers. And it's
Yeah.
already happening. The technology is already there. It's extraordinary. And look, to be fair, anybody who knows the show, I don't want people to think every time they come watch a show we're going to be in outer space or with NASA or something. We're usually in the country with our noses in the dirt in a field, but we think it's very important to go to the urban farms, to go to the research labs, to go to the college campuses, to see where all the other work, to go to the transportation and logistics hubs, to go to the ports, to see all the ways, all the things that have to happen. You know that it doesn't just magically appear at the supermarket or on your plate, but think I think people are aware of that, but it's kind of a vague mystery process
But you know what?
beyond
With children, they don't
especially
know where food comes from, especially urban children. They think it comes out of a can or it comes out of a box.
chocolate milk comes from brown cows.
Yes, you got it.
I've actually seen a study that said up to 20% of kids believe chocolate milk comes from brown cows, which is kind of cute, but
It's cute, but it's also sad.
it is
Um,
also sad. That is true.
right.
That is true.
We're gonna. You were there when Crew 11. What was it? Just the end of July.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
NASA when Crew 11 launched, weren't you?
We absolutely were. It was phenomenal. We were working, like I say, we're working on these series of shows. We've gone over and we've spent a couple of days in a facility that's actually called the Space Crop Lab. That's where they're testing all the new devices. Think about this. It's as simple as this. If you're in outer space, say you're on the space station and you're in zero gravity. How do you water plants? We've all seen what happens to water when the astronauts open their tend to the
Right.
big circular globules float around the cabin. How do you make that adhere to a plant? How do you make that plant take that water in? How do you do
How
that?
do you?
How
How do you?
how do you plant a soil? How do you plant a seed in soil and make it not float back up out of the soil? These were all the problems they had to solve. And so much of it happens now in little closed systems. Like you might see one little plant in a box about that square, and there will be tubing going up under it that's filling in the water, and then everything is sealed except right where the little stem comes out. And that's how it all holds together. And the box will be closed almost like a box of tissues that you keep on your coffee table.
Right.
That same kind of concept. That's what holds the soil in, holds the water in. It's just fascinating to look at the ingenuity and the way they've had to do that. Uh, and that's an application for space. What we don't often think about is that same kind of ingenuity is applied at every step of farming and every step of the food chain. Those are the kind of problems that always have to be solved and often resolved. As Mother Nature makes her counters, we make our counters, and then Mother Nature makes a counter, and we make a counter.
Yeah,
And
your
now they're
show
just
about bananas.
ooh, isn't that one crazy? Uh,
That
it,
backs it
it,
up.
it's funny how they connect. We look at this and the same kind of technology that's going to let us grow food on the International Space Station, and it's going to let us grow food on the coming lunar colony. And I'll tell you, we actually one of the scenes, one of the scenarios in the NASA shows is we actually open the show from the launch pad at launch, and it was one of the most extraordinary things I ever got to do. I open every show the same way. I give a little setup and explain what it's going to be about, and then I say, "Come on, let me take you where the food comes from." Well, this time we timed it right with the rocket launch. I did my setup, and by the time I got to come on, the noise from the rocket was
Yeah.
audible. So I had to put that last part of the opening on signs that we had pre-made for the audience, and I dropped them one by one to say, "Come on, let me take you where the food comes from." Then I had one more sign that said "In space." Now we had positioned me on the launch pad so that I was actually blocking the rocket in the gantry. So as I showed the last sign that says, "Come on, let me take you where the food comes from," in space, it actually takes off over my shoulder. So we're just thrilled with that from a cinematic standpoint. It doesn't have anything to do with food or farming, but it was one of the most thrilling. And then, of course, I
I'm
flipped
sure.
that last sign and I turned to watch the launch. And Dara, I've got to tell you, it was one of the most impactful, powerful moments of my life. Number one, it was very hard not to turn around as they were going 5, 4, 3, but to make myself face away from that and then to deliver my line and deliver my setup and turn around and catch it just as it came off the pad and really caught like you will actually hear me on camera. I'm just like, oh.
I can
it was just
imagine
it
so.
was just a transfixing moment. Now we'll follow that on to Johnson Space Center, where we will look at the history of food in space, where we will see the chain of scientific progression that led to some of the more significant breakthroughs that we have in agriculture and in the food world today. Things like Tetra packing and vacuum packing and things like that were all part of space age technology. Freeze drying, we don't think of that. So that same technological chain has led us now to a point where we can apply a lot of that technology in other areas. One of which is the banana pandemic. I don't know if that's on your radar. It's really not on many people's radar yet. We actually got flagged for spam on YouTube this week because of our banana episode, because they didn't think it was real. They thought it was. The
I
name
mean,
of that show is Bye Bye Bananas.
yeah, I
Uh,
watched
and
the show and I was thoroughly not aware of the problem with bananas, and that because of the earth, whatever this disease in the earth, I can't remember the name of it. I didn't write
It's
it
a
down. That's why I
fusarium.
can't.
It's a
Yeah.
fusarium. It's a
In
common to many crops, but bananas are particularly susceptible into this particular strain of fusarium. But doesn't it just shock you when you look at when someone comes out and goes, better eat all the bananas you can now because in less than 10 years we're probably not going to have any. And you're like, how do I not already know that? How do I not already know that? So even I think it was last week, one of the big banana suppliers, I won't name names, they're the first to start getting out of this. They issued a notice to their buyers that there is a shortage and there's a crisis and that we're going to have higher banana prices. That's why this fusarium has traveled the world over the last 20 years, the same way that our pandemic did.
right.
Um, and even though, we tried everything we could to counter it, and then they developed a vaccine to prevent or minimize it. And however people believe on that is their business. I literally don't want to get into that debate. I'm just following the track of science. Uh, and in this case, there was no answer for the fusarium. Once fusarium is in the soil, you can't get rid of it. There's no way to fumigate that soil. The only way that soil can be made arable again and can be usable again is to plant something that is resistant to fusarium or that fusarium does not attack. So in this case, you've got bananas, which are a world staple crop, and you've got fusarium already in the soil from an earlier banana blight that happened around the turn of the previous century. Do you remember the old song, Yes, We Have No Bananas?
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope I didn't just get you a copyright ding with that one. I don't think you'll have to pay a royalty on it, but that song, I grew up thinking of it just as a silly song. Something me and my brother would run around singing, Yes, we have no bananas. But it was real. The reason that song existed was in response to the first time we had a banana pandemic that wiped out the banana industry. That was an old variety called the Gros Michel. That's
Right.
what many of our older population grew up eating, the Gros Michel. So if you have banana flavored things like candies or popsicles or banana flavoring, it doesn't really taste like the Cavendish banana we get in the supermarket today because those flavorings were all based on the Gros Michel, the Big Mike banana. So
Okay.
Fusarium knocked that out. Cavendish was a good substitute because it was resistant to Fusarium. But over time, Fusarium has mutated. Now bananas are no longer resistant. So all the banana trees are dying. There is a research company in Raleigh, North Carolina, who has developed a genetic engineering approach that looks like a very promising solution. Now, it's really important to understand that's GE, genetic engineering, not GMO, genetic modification.
Right.
They're not going in and tinkering around with the DNA. This is genetic. The GE approach is like traditional crossbreeding, like Gregor Mendel did with the peas a jillion years ago, the same way that your grandparents and those before would take one kind of strong strawberry variety and another kind and breed them together and cross them together to accentuate the positive traits of both. That's what this does, but they do use the computer model and the DNA model so that they know exactly what to look for. And they've been able to develop banana varieties, Cavendish banana varieties, that appear to be resistant and tolerant to fusarium. The first trees from that research facility in Raleigh are in the jungles in Central America and now being tested. Sometime within the next 18 to 24 months, we'll know if we're going to save the banana or if by easily the turn of this decade, the banana may well have split.
Mm.
So, not to
I'm not
make
sure I
light.
like the pun. I got it. I got it.
I can't resist a pun. But yeah, it's a way to make light of a serious subject. And will the world end if we run out of bananas? No. But won't it be a little less nice? I love to have my bananas in the morning. But these are
Yeah.
the whole food world, the food that the world that you get to live in, that I get to live in. And I think I get to live in it at a more granular level, at a more micro level, because I literally get out and put my nose in the dirt and see what's happening on those front lines. But
Yeah.
it's just, we picked bananas out of a hat, and we could have well picked any of 10,000 other things that have equally fascinating stories. And I'm just very lucky I get to go tell them.
Well, you've done 5 seasons of the show. You're filming season 6. You do 13 episodes. And the episodes, maybe 22 minutes, I guess, if you're running it at the TV
Mhm.
station RFD TV. If
It's a
it's
half hour.
there, I'm assuming maybe they're commercials.
That's the RFT TV block. That's just a traditional broadcast television, cable television. It's on Direct TV, it's on Dish, it's on Sling, it's on various different systems. So that's our standard block. But we found so that's what you get in network television anymore. If you got a half hour show, you've actually got a 22-minute
2
show.
minutes. That's what
So
I was thinking.
that's our block. But it turns out that works really, really well for the incredible opportunity that's just been dropped in front of our lap, and we could not be more thrilled. We in the last over the last few weeks and months have been working with USDA. They have selected our show to be a major component of it's the first upgrade in 10 years to the core curriculum of the National Ag in the Classroom program. And our show and our shorts will now be going into U.S. schools, public schools, private schools, home schools, to serve an audience of 6 million students and 150,000 teachers. We're very humbled to have this opportunity to speak to young Americans at this level, to get in front of them, Dara, when they're still willing to listen, and they're still impressionable, and they can still hear messages like this. And what we hope is that we'll be sending messages of hope, messages of unity, messages of working together, messages about what really matters in life and the things that are really important. I think I think you probably feel the same way I do. I understand that without farming, without agriculture, nothing else matters. The computers and politics and cars and all that kind of stuff. If we were still running around in the jungles and the pampas chasing food, we wouldn't have time to do any of these other things. So I just
No.
think it's the most important thing there is, really.
Years ago, I'm getting a little bit of feedback here. I'm not sure. Um, but years ago, I learned about the threat of the bees. And the bees, if there are no bees, there's no more food. And I don't think people realize this.
We went to University of Florida. We went out in the bee lab, and we spent a couple of days with them looking at that very topic. What do the bees actually do? How big a threat is it? What is the threat? What do they really contribute to the food chain? What is the role that they play? And they explained it to us really, really well there. Take your average fast food cheeseburger. If you go, if you did not have bees in there, you'd still have the bun. Grain doesn't need pollination to grow. So your bun would be the same. It would be unchanged. You wouldn't have your mustard. You wouldn't have your ketchup. You wouldn't have your relish. You probably wouldn't have your onions. You'd have your cheese, but not as much, because the same things that cows feed on, the same things that bees feed on, the same things that produce nectar. So that would be reduced. And then even the burger patty on that sandwich would only be about the size of a quarter, because throughout the course of the food chain, that's the impact bees play. If bees aren't pollinating the things that the cows eat and the feed that the cows eat, then you don't have as many cows, you don't have as much beef. They're not as big, they don't produce as much, and the end result is a quarter-size cheeseburger with nothing but a little bit of cheese. And you talk about where's the beef, you would be all bun and just a little quarter of beef in the middle. So
Right.
that the threats that people are unaware of to our food supply, and it's not anything to be scared of. It's not a panic-stricken thing. It's a constant state. It's a constant state. It's the constant race that we've all been in since the dawn of cognition. It's the race between chaos and civilization. And civilization keeps winning because really smart people keep bailing us out and pulling us out of the fire. And I have to trust they'll continue to do so.
Hopefully, absolutely. Your first show was Tomato Time. Your
Yeah.
65th show was Urban Opportunity.
Hmm.
Is there anything that you see from start to finish? Any new trends? Anything we should be? I mean, there's a lot for us to be aware of, but
Sure.
any walkaways after 65 episodes?
Yeah, and I think the big one is we're seeing a big pivot towards what's called regenerative farming. I don't know if that's a term that's hit your radar yet or not. Um,
Yeah, set mine.
sustainability sustainability has become a buzzword. I think you're hearing, companies are just using sustainability as a marketing word now and as a buzzword and as a capture word. So in the actual farming world, people who are interested, farming has always been sustainable. You're always trying. Farmers are the greatest stewards that there are on the planet. They get a bad rap for being wasteful, and everybody thinks they constantly just come in and bombard everything with pesticides and fertilizers. And but what we all forget is that those things cost money. No farmer wants to put one more nickel into a crop than they have to. They would rather be able to grow perfect, pristine, chemical-free crops, but that's just a very difficult challenge in a world with 7.5 billion people to feed. So as we see things come down these scientific tracks and down these scientific trends, what we've seen at the same time is a new school of farmer emerge who's kind of like, okay, I understand. Dr. Norman Borlaug is called the father of the Green Revolution. After World War II, he worked for DuPont. He really invented our modern agricultural methods. Modern agriculture is pretty much all the result of Dr. Norman Borlaug. In his lifetime, he is credited with saving over 1 billion people from starving because he spent time
Mm.
in Mexico, Asia, and Africa revamping the food systems there, where the first question was not how do we grow the crops? How do we minimize the damage? How do we minimize the chemical inputs? It's how do we keep 1 billion people from starving? And I think that's the first question we have to understand. We have to understand that agriculture's first responsibility is to not let us starve to death. And it's wonderful to be able to sit in an ivory tower somewhere and criticize and complain and to say, oh, they shouldn't use this and they shouldn't use that. But they're not the ones out there trying to feed everybody, and they don't realize what a hard job it is. But the movement in regenerative farming is taking Dr. Borlaug's modern agriculture playbook and going back and remembering, now, wait a minute, we grew food before Norman Borlaug. We didn't all starve before Norman Borlaug.
All right.
Maybe we threw out a baby with that bathwater. They're going back and picking up reclaimed babies from the side of the road from all the bathwater that got thrown out. And they're bringing back these old agricultural practices, some of which almost seem like arcane. We were with a farmer in South Carolina who grows peas and beans and those kind of things. One of the primary insecticides he uses, I would say guess, but it'd take 1,000,000 years, is molasses. Molasses, because it works really, really well for those particular plants and those legumes. And when we see these regenerative farmers who are doing things like We met several down in the Everglades who are growing tropical crops with no irrigation, with no pesticide, and with no fertilizer. What they've done is they've adopted ancient island ways and ancient tropical cultures ways where you plant cohorts, what they call. So you'll have a tall palm tree producing coconuts or dates or whatever. Then under that, you'll have a shorter tree like a mango or a banana, or so, and then under that, you'll have a bush that produces something. And then at the ground level, you'll have a ground level crop like a pineapple or something like that. They're all together, they're all protected, and you bed up mulch around it to preserve the water. What natural water comes from dew, rain, whatever, filters down from top to bottom and creates a healthy ecosystem. It's like a little mini self-enclosed ecosystem. So it's remarkable the things that people are doing, and these are ancient ways that are being brought back. Uh, and I think the best proof in the pudding. You mentioned I we made a two-part episode where I spent a day working as a farmer in 1870. That was incredible. I never felt more closely connected to my roots, to my grandparents, to my great grandparents. I felt like I truly was understanding. When you're plowing behind a mule team and you're stomping through that furrow, you're really farming, and you you
You
really
really,
understand what they went through. But I watched some of I've seen I showed that show to my mother, of course. She's 88 years old. She lives in Atlanta. She's still an active real estate broker. She's amazing. She set the bar very high. Uh, and then we watched some of the shows about some of these regenerative farmers. And as we sat there on her couch watching these shows, she just kept slapping me on the arm and going, "That's what my grandpa Henry used to do. That's what my grandfather used to do. The molasses on the peas, all these new regenerative, what we are seeing as new regenerative means are actually just very old things that worked, and we forgot about them. So it's not all young people who are going into regenerative farming, but obviously they're leading the way. They're going
yeah,
back into their great grandparents' playbooks and they're saying what worked for them. And that's what we see. I think that's very exciting. People who aren't just going by the book and saying we're spraying this chemical today because that's what it says to do. They're saying, well, look at the crop. Does it look like it needs it? No. Well, then why would we do that?
right.
So it's just, they say regenerative. I think maybe it ought to just be called common sense farming.
Yeah.
But
Let
that's
me
a
ask,
big move. That's a big term.
you were talking about your family. Let's give people a little bit of um, background on you. You grew up in Georgia.
Yeah,
Your dad was a preacher,
he sure
moved
was.
around a lot.
Hmm.
Um, Tell me more about your family table. I always like to know, growing up, what was on the table? What did they feed you? What was family
I had
life
a
like?
I had a country grandmother, I had a country granny, and I had a town granny. And the town was a little bitty town, beautiful little town called Madison, Georgia. If anybody loves to go sightseeing and you're heading south, look up Madison, Georgia. You won't regret it. You will thank me for it. Some of the most beautiful antebellum homes just lined the main graceful curving downhill slope into the city because it didn't get burned on the march to the sea. So it's all still there and preserved. And that's one of my family homes. We grew up very much eating the traditional Southern stuff, but it came out in two different ways when my country granny cooked it and when my town granny cooked it. They were very different. Like my country granny's fried chicken was going to be like more smothered in a big iron skillet, whereas my town granny was going to get out the pressure cooker and she was going to have perfectly crisp, no grease. It was going to be a perfect fried chicken. And then we might have, whereas my country granny would cook up a mess of speckled butter beans or something like that, my town granny would go have the small baby limas that were perfectly picked and prepared. So really, it was a very southern and very country and that split again between town and rural, that was just, it captivated me early. My country granny made biscuits. My town granny prepared rolls, because that was, biscuits were for the, biscuits were for the hoi polloi. Fancy people ate rolls. So my town granny, my Granny Carter, very much was aspirational of being a fancy person. I'm not sure
Oh.
she ever quite got there, but she sure did have all the toolbox for it.
I was very impressed by your philosophy. And philosophy, I think, across the board throughout everything that you've done, through working for AOL, for trade magazines, for your syndication, just to let people know. What you wrote about was gaming. It had nothing to do with food.
No, it didn't.
But across your very varied career, your philosophy was to treat people with common decency, that it takes no more effort than being an asshole. I love that. But it's true. It doesn't hurt you. It doesn't hurt you to sit there and say something nice to somebody.
It's just as easy. It's easy.
Yeah.
And that's a philosophy. I'll go back to those country grannies and to my own mother, who instilled all of that in me. And I was, my father was obviously a powerful influence in my life as a small town minister and a farm town minister. He was always somebody in town. As a result, we were always told, my mother was always chasing us around going, everybody's watching you. You can't get away with anything. And Dara, that was true. So we knew that. But I always knew it was the strong women who provided the real framework for my life. And they made it very clear out of the gate. Even my country granny they did not have money. They did not have means. They had been farmers until the boll weevil drove them out of farming, and they struggled for the rest of their lives. But she never lost her dignity, and she never lost her grace. She never let it make her mean. She never let it make her taciturn. My town granny actually probably had it worse. My grandfather was killed in the Gainesville, Georgia tornado of 1936, which claimed something like 232 lives. And that was 6 months before my father was born. So in 1936, my grandmother was a widow with 9 and 10-year-old daughters and a newborn on the way. And she had to find some way. At that time, there was no assistance available. There was no family means. There was no anything. And I would have never guessed at my grandmother Carter's overall condition. I didn't know she was poor. I didn't know she struggled. I knew she had a pin neat, pretty little house that made me feel more at home than anywhere else in the world. And she made me feel more special than anybody else. And I know that what those two women went through was very, very difficult. But they had the dignity and the grace to still be kind and decent people. And they instilled that in me. And they were prime examples for me, just like my mama.
Yeah, that worked through. I just want to tell people that you are a singer. So if you go to the website, which is wherethefoodcomesfrom.com, you'll have links to all the social media. It will come up in the comments section. So the links are there, but there's also a page for Chip Carter.
That's right.
Musician and singer.
ChipCarterMusic.com.
Okay. So when I do my little stories on Facebook and Instagram, and I don't know if you saw it or not, I tagged you, but I do it 1 o'clock the day before. I found your music on Instagram and Facebook and put your music about Vidalia along with the story. And I have to say, okay, and I wrote it down. You sound like Willie Nelson. And I'm sure people have probably told you that. In Vidalia, you sure did.
I've heard that one a time or two, but I mean, it's just, If that's the case, it's a huge compliment. But if that's the case, it's because I'm channeling that same thing. It's so authentic. It's so real. And that song is called Sweet Vidalia. And it's not about Vidalia onions. It's about the people. It's about everything my show is about. It's about who they are. It's about the spirit. And that translates. It's not just Vidalia, Georgia. It's every small town where farming is strong. That's who the people are. You know, they teach their children to be kind and to be strong and to be faithful. And so music's always been my first love. There are other places that people hear my music and they don't even know it. I actually got to compose and perform my own theme song for the show because I looked around and realized I was the producer and nobody told me I couldn't. So I did it, and this was extraordinary. I got invited to a private studio in Tampa when word got out that I was looking for a place to go record my theme song. And I went into a studio that had an amazing guitar vault, literally like an old bank vault. They had guitars in there from Jimi Hendrix and Elvis and Pete Townsend and about 150 classic guitars. And they're kind of like, would you like to play one of our guitars? Or, you know, we know you brought your own and they're good, but we picked one out we thought based on the demo might be really good for this theme song. I'm like, sure. And they brought out a 1961 Fender Telecaster, took it out of the case and went to hand it to me. And they said, this is the guitar that played on Roy Orbison's Oh Pretty Woman. I jerked my hands like, I can't touch that. You know, and they're like, you can do it, you can do it. So actually in the theme song to the show, what you hear, that very distinctive low growling guitar is the same guitar and the same sound from Roy Orbison's Oh Pretty Woman. I told my father about that night after I got home from the studio and it'd gone so well. It was one of the last conversations he and I got to have, sadly. And Dad was always Dad. And I told him, and I was so excited about it. And Dad put it all in perspective. He's like, "Well, did it make you play better?" And I told him, I said, "Dad, I think it did. I think it inspired me to rise up to that occasion." So music's a beautiful part of my life. I'm glad I don't really have to pursue it and chase it, but I sure do love to share it. And I've written a whole bunch of new songs I'm looking forward to recording, hopefully before the end of this year. And
Well,
with a family bluegrass band of kids, we met in the North Carolina mountains, who are so incredibly talented. They're Boone and Church. It's two families that come together to make a band. And they won the National FFA Talent Contest. So I'm really looking forward to bringing some of the guys I've always played with and getting together with those kids and seeing if we can make something special out of there. And thank you for bringing that up. That's fun. I love to talk about that.
yeah. Well, we've come to the end of the show, so I have questions for you.
Yep, your
And
famous list of 8.
something 5 or 6, whatever.
Famous list of questions. Yes.
Yes.
I think you make a list and then we get the mystery. You're kind of like, now you get to find out which ones I picked. I think that's
Well, I just go, if you could go back and give your 17-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't. The plan that's in your head, the things you think you can do, the goals you have, the mission you're on, don't change it because you're right. And it's been difficult sometimes to stick to this track, the same track that you just mentioned, and this track of kindness and equal treatment for all people, especially in a media career that's been hurly-burly and up and down and sometimes globe-trotting and jet-setting. And there have been years where I'm staying in the Four Seasons and the Ritz-Carlton, and there are years like now where we're staying in the Hayhira Inn because that's the only thing in town. But it would be you're on the right track. Don't change anything. It's going to get better.
Since I know you love food in all aspects, I have
Yeah.
to, do you cook?
Oh yes.
All
My
right.
wife, who is also a producer on the show, and our food editor for Where the Food Comes From, and our cookbook editor is a really great. She cooks everything, but she's a little Jersey girl. She's a little Italian Jersey girl, and I'm a Georgia cracker boy. So we both cook, and we both love to cook. And a lot of times we elbow each other out of the way
Yeah.
in the kitchen and fight over who's going to get to cook that night. And sometimes we're able to cook together, and that's always fun. But yeah,
Okay,
I absolutely,
okay,
absolutely.
Cracker Boy, tell me your culinary fail.
Oh, wow. Uh, Well, the first time I ever tried to make a cake was miserable. I've got Polaroid pictures. I was 9 years old. And I did the classic. I mixed up the sugar and salt. So that one was terrible. But then when I was in my early 30s, I had just discovered ginger as an ingredient for cooking. And I found what it really brought to a stir fry. So every time I'd make a stir fry, I'd add more and I'd add more. And I had company coming one night. We had company coming. I'm like, I'm gonna make the best stir fry ever. And I just went crazy with the fresh ginger. And we all sat down to eat. And Dara, we might as well have been eating a plate of hot coals. It's the single hottest dish, and it was so the guests were all so kind. Everybody's sitting there, even though their eyes are bugging out and there's sweat pouring out. Everybody's trying to, they're going, it's delicious. And we all got about 4 bites in, and I put my fork down and I said, let's all go get something to eat. Thank you so much for
Well, that
for,
teaches
for
a
your
lesson,
reaction.
taste as you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And don't, there is such thing as too much of a good thing. That's another takeaway there.
Okay. Now, this is a typical question, but you do wake up. My question is, if you wake up with a new talent tomorrow morning, what would it be? And you've done so many things.
Oh, I got one. I got one.
Okay.
Visual arts. Visual arts. I can see it. I can never express it. I can't draw so much as a conclusion. But I'd love to be able to express myself visually through drawing or painting. I don't think I'll ever get that. And I think my canvas is probably, as director of the show and helping paint these vistas and some of the beautiful landscapes we get. But that'd be it. It'd be visual
Yeah.
arts, I think.
Okay. What are two musts that have to be in your refrigerator?
Oh, at all times. Would you count garlic? Because we keep it in a couple of ways. I mean, I keep garlic in it. We're garlic freaks. We're garlic fanatics. So we keep a garlic cellar. We keep whole peeled cloves in the refrigerator. We keep minced in olive oil. We keep minced in water. We keep all the different dices of garlic. So I'd say we're a pretty garlic intensive
Probably a
household.
dab or two behind the ears, too.
Little of that. You got to remember, my wife is Italian, so that's, we're about that. She
Okay.
uses a garlic perfume. I use Georgia barbecue sauce cologne.
Oh,
So,
sounds
and that'd be
great.
the other thing, Georgia barbecue sauce from my
Okay.
favorite little place in the middle of Georgia. It's about to turn 100 years old, Fresh Air Barbecue. We made an episode with them called Cooking with Fire, about the disappearing art of cooking with fire.
Yeah. All right. What didn't I ask you that I probably should have?
I'd say you've been very thorough and you've done your research. You could ask me about my grandkids. We've been
Well,
blessed. We've got five wonderful kids, and they've grown up and given us five wonderful grandchildren. And I bring that up the same way every grandfather does. Yeah, ask me about my grandkids, and I'll tell you about my grandkids. But there's a longer tail to it, and we were able to raise the kids with an awareness of where the food comes from and what it means to them. And from I spent much the first half of my life in Georgia, and then moved to Florida. I made sure the kids were always our when I was coaching soccer, our soccer field was surrounded on three sides by orange groves. We made sure they knew where the strawberry fields were, and they knew that. And even better, we've been able to do that with our grandchildren and with our backyard garden and our back porch garden, especially our grandkids. We feel like right now the string we've got, that's 4, 5, and 7, are really, really locked into it, really connected. And I can almost bet you somewhere in that bunch is the next generation host of where the food comes from.
I'm sure. They are cutting the lawn here. I don't know if you can hear it.
I can't, but that's okay.
Good. That's good. That's good. I hear it. Every Thursday, I can't change it. It's apartment living. They come
It's the
and
thing, right?
mow right
And
underneath my window.
we'd complain if they didn't.
Well, no, I don't, it just goes on. I want the show to be perfect, but it's technology. And you being a producer, you understand that technology sometimes
I think we all
is
do.
not your friend.
And Dara, I think these days we're all understanding more and more there are so many forces beyond our control, just like that. And I think that's where our new interest in food and our new interest in eating, and in particular, where our new interest in where the food comes from is coming from. There's so many things we can't control. That's one we can, what goes in our mouths and what we feed our families.
Absolutely. And what a perfect note to end your visit with the Food Enthusiast. And you can add us to the list, the crane, the plow, and now my show. Thank you so much, Chip, for being on the show
Thank
and
you
sharing your
so much
time.
for having me. Thank you for the work that you do and for helping spread the word.
All right, great. Thank you.
Watch us on YouTube.
All righty. Next week's guest will be Nikki Meatballs Serafina. Need I say anything more? Next week is Nikki Meatballs. Feel free to reach out to me via my email address, which is food@jmoreliving.com, or my Instagram is @DaraCooks, or on Facebook, I do have the Food Enthusiast page. You can sign up at jmoreliving.com for the free bi-monthly This Week in Baltimore Eating newsletter. Recipes, local food news, videos from the Food Enthusiast. Click on the connect button on the jmoreliving.com website, and you'll see where you can fill in to receive notifications from Jmore Living, and you will get that newsletter. All our shows are immediately archived in video form on Jmore Living's Facebook page and jmoreliving.com. We truly appreciate it when you share our show with friends and family. Feel free to go back into the archives and enjoy our past shows. As I like to end my show, may your plates always, always remain full. Hope to see you next Thursday.